Coming up on Mountain News at 5:30, Perry County schools have become a target for thieves. What's being taken and how much has it cost the district? And could a California measure affect the price of your pork? The Supreme Court is set to decide whether a law in California violates the Constitution's Commerce Clause.
Plus, could we see not only showers, but the return of a few thunderstorms as well? The latest coming up is Mountain News at 5:30. Starts now.
Dedicated to Southern and Eastern Kentucky, this is WYMT Mountain News at 5:30.
Good evening, I'm Steve Hensley. An Eastern Kentucky school district is investigating a string of thefts, leaving school officials upset for their staff and students. And as WYMT's Dakota Makers reports, the school district is now out thousands of dollars.
This surveillance video from Perry County Schools shows what district staff believe to be a silver Chevy Cavalier back into a spot. Staff say two people got out of the car and stole meat from a storage unit behind Perry County Central High School early Tuesday morning.
They would actually, to get into that place, would have had to have climbed a fence that we have around that.
Harvey Caldwell with Perry County Schools says they believe the two in the video actually moved a surveillance camera to help shield their identity.
This is not the first time this has happened. You know, this is probably the third or fourth time that we've been broke into over the last several months.
Several weeks ago, A.B. Combs School, which houses students from Robinson Elementary and Buckhorn School after their schools were damaged by flooding, was broken into. Staff say a man and woman broke a window and stole two laptops, saying they had hoodies on and turned their faces away from surveillance cameras at the school.
The way that these are happening, it tells us that the places looks like they're being scoped out, because if they know where the cameras are actually placed on the buildings, then they know where to hide.
Saying the school district is now out of thousands of dollars, anywhere between $5,000 and $10,000.
Parents rely on us to provide students with a safe place and a place to provide warm meals. And so this is taken from that.
Caldwell says they do not believe the thefts are connected. In Perry County, Dakota Makris, WYMT Mountain News.
Among other thefts, school staff say they have had lawn equipment stolen, along with bows and arrows from Perry Central's archery team. If you have any information, you're asked to call Central office at 606-439-5813.
Well, clouds continue to push into the mountains through the evening hours. We've seen our fair share of cloudiness on the increase as we've gone through today. We'll continue to see that into tonight, but before then, still some sunshine and some mild temperatures. Mount Vernon along Interstate 75 looking pretty darn good at this hour. Just some high clouds right now, taking you to Buffalo Mountain in southern Perry County, where we're at 73 and seeing high clouds overhead. Keep an eye out. We could be in the cards for a pretty nice sunset out there. Low to mid 70s around the region. It is mild, right around or just above average for this time of year. Satellite and radar put together. Not a whole lot on the radar, but a few clouds on that satellite as warmer, milder air begins to push in, and we'll see more clouds move in over the next couple of days. For tonight, 70 as we head towards the 6 o'clock hour, into the upper 50s by bedtime and into the mid 50s overnight. It's not going to be a chilly night by any means. Now, coming up, I'll have the latest on when we could see the potential for some strong storms coming up in just a few minutes. Steve?
Evan, thanks. Supreme Court justices will determine the constitutionality of a 2018 California proposition on animal welfare. The National Pork Producers Council has sued over the constitutionality of the law, saying it hurts pig farmers and will make pork more expensive across the country. CBS's Natalie Brand has more from the Supreme Court.
Pork producers got their say in front of the Supreme Court Tuesday, challenging a California law that could impact how pigs are raised nationwide.
California, which produces almost zero pork, consumes a tremendous amount of it, is trying to reach out into other states and impose its moral views on other states.
California voters passed Proposition 12, requiring more living space for farm animals eventually sold as food in the state.
This is a law that addresses only the pork that is consumed in the state of California.
Yeah, but the reality is the reason they have this law is, one, because they don't have pork producers in California, so nobody's going to be hurt from that point of view, and two, they want to affect conduct in other states.
The Humane Society has argued the California law is not only about animal welfare, but human health.
We've seen this over and over again, confining animals in these extreme conditions where they are packed so tightly in spreads viruses, and it makes it more virulent.
This case may have major implications on the Constitution's Commerce Clause. Legal analysts say the High Court's opinion could impact states' ability to regulate other issues as well.
Pork producers argue the added expense to comply with California's law will ultimately get passed on to consumers.
What California will do is force farmers to adopt these standards that are going to raise the price of food for everybody.
It is the right move, and people are willing, even if it has a slight increased cost initially to change over.
Farmers say the court's ruling could change the industry. A decision is expected by the end of June. Natalie Brand, CBS News, the Supreme Court.
The Biden administration sided with pork producers and argued against the proposition in court. Should an unborn baby have constitutional rights? That's a question the Supreme Court has decided not to answer. The High Court announced it will not wade into the so-called fetal personhood debate. A Catholic group and 2 pregnant women who have since given birth sued the state of Rhode Island, asking for clarification on whether fetuses should have constitutional rights. In May, the state dismissed the case based on Roe v. Wade, but when the landmark case legalizing the federal right to an abortion was overturned, they asked the Supreme Court to take up the case. Today, the Supreme Court declined to take up an appeal from Dylan Roof. Roof, a white nationalist, was sentenced to death for killing 9 people in 2015 at a historically black church in Charleston, South Carolina. Following that federal court conviction, Roof pleaded guilty in 2017 to state murder and attempted murder charges. He received 9 consecutive life sentences and 3 consecutive 30-year sentences on those counts. This appeal is Roof's latest attempt to overturn his sentence after a lower court affirmed it last year. The Supreme Court is hearing the case of Rodney Reed. Reed is a black inmate on death row who's hoping to use post-conviction DNA evidence to prove his innocence. He claims an all-white jury wrongly convicted him of killing a white woman in Texas in 1998. Reed admitted to having an affair with the victim, but says her fiancé, a local police officer, was the last to see her alive. He says during the last 2 decades, evidence and DNA testing point to the fiancé as the murder suspect since his conviction. His appeals have been rejected. Reed's case will put a new focus on DNA testing from crime scene evidence and how long an inmate has to claim access to it. A federal appeals court ruled that Reed waited too long to bring his claim. New York City Mayor Eric Adams signed legislation today barring concealed guns from Times Square. Mayor Adams said it's part of the ongoing effort to establish a gun-free area in designated sensitive locations. This designates the boundaries of the Times Square sensitive area and prohibits concealed carry permit holders from bringing firearms there.
Today we enshrine in law that Times Square is a gun-free zone. Licensed gun carriers and others may not enter this area with a gun unless otherwise specifically authorized by law. But we're not stopping here just to deal with this area. We are fighting back against illegal guns coming into our city and prosecuting those who carry illegal guns.
Similar state regulations went into effect last month but are facing legal challenges. Last week, a judge ruled sections of the law violates the Second Amendment. Attorney General Letitia James has filed a motion to keep the state law in effect while New York appeals a temporary restraining order that goes into effect tomorrow. After more than 20 years in prison, Adnan Saeed, the subject of the Serial podcast, is a free man. Saeed was serving a life sentence in prison for the 1999 kidnapping and murder of his high school ex-girlfriend, Hae Min Lee. He was 17 at the time of her death and has maintained his innocence. After their own reinvestigation, prosecutors requested Saeed's conviction be vacated last month. A judge approved the motion and Saeed was freed, but he was ordered to be on house arrest until prosecutors decided whether or not to retry him. Both sides presented closing arguments today in the 3-month penalty phase for the Parkland school shooter. A Florida jury will then decide whether to sentence the convicted gunman to death, a decision that requires a unanimous decision on at least one of the 17 victims. CBS's Christian Benavidez has more from the courthouse in Fort Lauderdale.
And what he did was to murder children at school and their caretakers.
Prosecutors described the horrors of Valentine's Day 2018 to jurors one last time, detailing how Nicholas Cruz carried out the massacre of 17 people at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School. The lead attorney for the state repeatedly mentioned victims by name.
Helen Ramsey and Nicholas Durrett, who were hiding when they were killed.
The prosecution explained to jurors they will have to weigh 7 aggravating factors, presenting some as slam dunks.
Heinous, atrocious, or cruel beyond any reasonable doubt.
The defense has tried to paint their client in a sympathetic light, saying he was poisoned in the womb and doomed from the start.
A broken, brain-damaged, mentally ill young man.
Their only goal at this point, persuading at least one juror to spare his life.
This is your individual moral decision. No one else's.
Victims' parents, spouses, and family members packed the courtroom. Some shed tears. One mother fled into the hallway where she broke down sobbing. The judge prepared the jury to begin deliberations Wednesday.
Anything that can possibly connect to the internet, you cannot bring.
Jurors were told to come with suitcases. They'll be sequestered if they don't reach a decision on the first day. Christian Benavides, CBS News, Fort Lauderdale.
The Parkland massacre is the deadliest mass shooting ever to go to trial in the United States. Coming up on Mountain News at 5:30, fall is here and financial experts say it's the perfect time to look ahead to next year's budget. The keys to a smart start for 2023.
Well, soggy weather could be returning as soon as tomorrow. Latest breakdown on rain chances coming your way.